Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, here to Coach Up. I'm Travis Turner. That is Ed Chapman on screen with me. We are here into episode 6. And Ed, of course, we had our analytics special, which changed our count. I probably should have done that differently somehow because I was trying to keep track of our great classic artists and our tracks from back in the day that have contributed. Of course, we've had Merle Haggard or the Good Times Over for Good. We've talked about the difference between getting what you want and getting what you need. The Rolling Stones came in there for us. We've had the iconic men of Hee Haw in Gloom, Despair, and Agony. And then The Hard Way Every Time, Jim Croce there, including a cover by Jerry Reed at one point we found. So we've just had some real iconic figures. No one is to blame here. I don't know if we've got an icon exactly, but we're children of the 80s. Other children of the 80s may remember Howard Jones. No one is to blame here. And we wanted this title, we wanted this topic because we live in a world, Ed, a society where blame is an industry. And it's not something that we have a monopoly on in sports. It is in anything in the world. We've got to identify not even what the problem is necessarily, but we know something's wrong. Somebody has to be to blame for this. It has to be somebody's fault. Are we worried about fixes or solutions? Nah, we'll get to that later maybe. We got to put blame on somebody right here, right now.
I mean, that's just like you said, that's how it's really evolved. I don't know that it's always been that way. Maybe it always has been. But of course, now we have the platform capabilities to, uh, you know, to go on social media and put forth our viewpoint and then get a lot of support from people who say, who are ready to rally behind us and say, yeah, you're right. You're right. And so, um, in the world of sports, we know that the blame always starts with the coaches, right? I mean, if a team can't perform, doesn't perform, whether it really doesn't matter if anybody has realistic understandings and expectations of what that team should be able to do. It's when they can't do something that somebody else is doing, then we have to blame somebody. And it has always been the case, and we used to laugh about it. We saw it and heard it growing up in team sports, in pro sports, especially. You like in baseball, you couldn't fire 25 players, so you fire the manager.
That's right.
So that mentality has bubbled over down to the what we now know as a version of professional sports, which is big time college athletics. But of course, it creeps its way into every area of life because even our high school, middle school, travel ball scenarios often take on a miniature version of pro sports mentalities, right? And so, you either work to get rid of the coach or you pack up and leave, right?
That's pretty common, yes.
I mean, that's where we end up, and somebody has to be to blame. And very, very rarely does the blame game ever start in the mirror.
Well, that's a fact. And of course, as you guys that have been with us, and maybe this is the first episode you've ever seen, Ed and I are building a resource for coaches. We also hope it's something that will help parents. And some of those parents obviously may coach at the youth level. Some of them may do the very dangerous thing Ed and I have done, which is coach their own children at the high school level. But for anybody that's involved in sports that are trying to help develop a player, that are experiencing this, and again, certainly for all of our coaches, we just want to talk about these issues and raise levels of awareness. And do we have some strategies? Do we have some thoughts and ideas? In some cases, we will. Again, we want people to know anything you're experiencing, you're not the first person to experience it. You're not alone in that regard. And I think the way that the blame goes, there's a lot of different things that we have to look at and consider here, Ed, for coaches. First of all, I want to make sure that you and I talk before we're done this episode on how coaches can deal with this presence, this constant presence of somebody looking to affix blame when there's a problem. But I also want to start right here because this is a coach's resource. Blame and this is kind of going to be the whole point of the episode. Blame doesn't fix anything. It does not offer a solution. It just identifies maybe who's responsible, but that's all it's trying to do. Is it's just trying to put responsibility somewhere, and as you said, generally not on me or mine. But for coaches, it is entirely possible. And this kind of ties back to gloom, despair, and agony on me. Why are we always feeling bad? Why are we always embarrassed if our team isn't performing well? It's because we blame ourselves. And I will say to all coaches, having accountability and responsibility is important. It's absolutely important. We must be the first to acknowledge our accountability, our responsibility for what isn't going well. But then at some point, you have to move on from that, because if you wallow in it and you put all the blame on your shoulders, now we're at the self-pity party and we're not changing anything. And Ed, I think that's one of the most difficult things for competitive people and for honest and self-aware people that are willing to accept their portion of the blame. You can't get trapped there. You got to do something to affect and to impact the situation in a positive manner.
Exactly. I mean, and here's the thing. This is true anywhere, but of course, we're talking about in the coaching realm. Constructive criticism is necessary. And it starts with a strong level of self-awareness. And if your first impulse is to deliver constructive criticism to others before you deliver any to yourself, then naturally you're going to get caught up in this sense of superiority where you feel like that I'm always doing what I'm supposed to do and it's everybody else that lets us down. But you can't take it too far, like you said, because then you become somebody who beats themselves up and wallows in self-pity, and that accomplishes nothing. The whole point of constructive criticism is to construct something, not to just deconstruct or not even to just debrief and say, well, this is who's to blame, and if they don't do better, then we can't be better. Well, how? And again, how can I, if I'm the coach and I have a responsibility, then how can I put them in a better position? How can I explain it to them better? How can I coach them better? Where have I come up short in my expectations that I should have for myself? And then, yes, even as a coach who is working to be a servant leader and wants to bring out the best in everyone, there has to be enough honesty and enough depth of relationship to where it can be obvious that you have done the self-evaluation, you have critiqued yourself, you are seeking to construct or build something better as a coach from your standpoint, but then you have to transfer it to those who are responsible. And being responsible versus blaming is a huge difference. Blaming just simply implies that we're going to cast some negativity over here. That way we can be out from under it and be done with it. But the idea that you would constructively criticize and that you would seek to improve them and help them build something better, that's the whole point behind it. And of course, like I said, you have to have the depth of relationship with them that says, hey, this is not just casting blame and walking away. There's a level of responsibility that falls on your shoulders as a member of this team. And this is where I have not helped you get to this point, but you will also have to own your part in it. And we have to partner together at some point. And then as a coach, you have to move into your various fields of motivation and psychology, right? How do you best get the best out of this person, as opposed to just simply let them wear that blame, because you're often not going to get the results that you want when all you've done is point out that they let us down, they didn't do their job, that's not acceptable, but you didn't follow up with what would be acceptable and how can we get there.
Right. I had an episode planned because you and I talked about this so much, kind of a separate episode addressing coaches and the post-game address.
Yeah.
Especially after a loss. But I'm going to go ahead and bring it up here. We may treat it separately again, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it because I think one of the places where coaches can get themselves in trouble, and often unintentionally, but it is heat of the moment after a loss or a poor performance. And of course, I will raise hand to guilt as having been one of the longest winded post game orators, good or bad. Either way, the kids just want to go get something to eat, and I won't stop addressing everything that's happened. And Ed, as I've stepped away from coaching into the role of parent or just simply observer, I'm drawn to the post game address, and I have tended to put a clock on. I have tended to watch and put the stopwatch on my phone and see just how long we have continued to belabor. Everybody already knows. And I think you and I have gotten to the point where we believe, other than a few attaboys, maybe a couple of points of emphasis in our culture that we just want to hammer home. And then when we're supposed to be back and meet again, you just need to step away because, especially when heartache or hard times are afoot, the blame game is what gets played most often post game.
Yeah. I mean, and there's almost zero redeeming qualities to that in the post. In fact, it's so close to zero, it looks an awful lot like a zero. I mean, we just know that. And so, yeah, really, time wise, 2 or 3 minutes, really. But even in that, sometimes you can say too much.
Right.
And so, one of the things that I learned a long time ago came down from a quote or a thought that was attributed to John Wooden, the legendary UCLA basketball coach, and that is that you let no mistake go unchallenged. But that is primarily for practice.
Right.
Okay. And so do your harping on and your constant correction during practice.
Right.
And then when you fail to see the things that you've emphasized in practice show up during the game, after the game is not the time to try to address it.
Won't be changing anything, will we?
Bring it back to the next practice.
Yeah.
And go from there. And so, yeah, we often want to do a full debrief of everything that took place, and most of that was addressed to some degree throughout the course of the game anyway. But it certainly can't be adjusted, corrected, and improved upon in that moment. So, a lot to learn sometimes from simply limiting your feedback in the moment. Um, you know, uh, One of the things that I learned that I tried to use during the course of actual gameplay is, during timeouts or moments where you can address the team or even individual players, is to simply say, what are you seeing or experiencing out there that I can help you with? What is it that we didn't prepare you for, or that you feel a little bit out of place on? What could I help you with? And let them provide feedback. And they may or may not have anything to say at that moment, but it empowers them to address what's on their mind at that moment.
Right.
And that's really the only thing you're going to be able to consistently impact, is whatever is occupying their minds and emotions in the moment anyway.
Well, and Ed, I think it's so important, just moment by moment, whether it be in practice and games and every step of your relationship with players, both as individuals and as a collective, to always turn it back to their needs. And again, I think that's where, for us as coaches, when we get in trouble, is the very myopic viewpoint of through our particular lens, because we forget that we're talking about the young men that you're coaching now, that I'm working with as an instructor. Of course, I've got instructional students as young as 10 years old. But when you're talking about even 14, 15, 16-year-old players at the high school level, they don't have our experience. They don't have our perspective. And so these things that we feel so deeply and see so clearly, they do not have any reference point of their relational point is to where they are. And you either get there, as you say, asking them what is happening for you, both mentally, emotionally, physically, what do you need? And here's the other thing as coaches, we have to remember in terms of this whole blame game culture. We get the slings and arrows as coaches, and maybe unfairly, but we are the adults. It has to be part and parcel what you signed up with. But the blame game, you can never forget that that young man, that young woman that you are coaching may be feeling the blame from you, even if you do not say it expressly. They may be interpreting from your body language, from your actions. They may feel like you're blaming them for their failures. They may be getting in the car after the game and feeling that from their parents. They may be getting that from their teammates. And whether or not it is actually being said or actually happening, they may feel it. And we know this because you and I certainly did it as players. There is a likelihood that a great percentage of the young people we coach, they are blaming themselves. We have to help them deal with that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you do have a lot of conscientious athletes that actually sabotage their own mental performance because of their constant attacks on their own efforts. And so we have to be really alert to that and work. Again, you have sort of the team collective approach that you have to address, but you also have to individualize it as often as possible. Because not everyone processes what's happening to them or how their performance is going. Not all of them processes the same way. And right. So it's very, there's an awful lot of nuance in that. And when we as coaches, when we lose sight of that and we simply get wrapped up in the scoreboard, then we will tend to fail in our duties to provide what is needed as guides, as mentors, as the direction givers, as motivators, whatever it happens to be. We will have set a bad example that is focused too much on the outcome and not enough on the process. And that's, again, that's the give and take with human nature inside of competitive athletics, is that there are scores kept and there are winners and losers in each outing. And if the outcome is our constant focus, then we're not improving the process along the way. We've missed and lost another opportunity to grow and develop in the process. And honestly, we have failed to do our job, and there should be a fair amount of blame that would land on us at that point.
Right. Yeah. Now I mean, there's another reality is at some point we all do have blame coming, and then what? What do we do from there? And of course, again, I think as we build this coaching resource, as we try to help folks who walk where we have walked and to do it better. I think I've referenced it here in some of our episodes, Ed. I think maybe back in episode 1, but there's the great book from Joe Ehrman, Coaching Inside Out, and that idea of coaching ourselves up first and then being able to help our players in the right way. And Joe in that book is very clear about that we need a mission statement as coaches. We need to know why we're doing what we're doing. And I think it's also important to think about for ourselves how we do that. And might we recommend to young coaches in particular that they have some sort of journal or checklist system for themselves where at least weekly they look at that mission statement. They look at those tenets, those foundational principles that, hey, am I being a servant leader here? Am I thinking about and talking about the emotional welfare of my players? How is this human being doing? And so on and so forth. I mean, we are obviously, anybody who invests their time in coaching, they care. There's some good stuff there, some good stuff going on. But you mentioned to me as I went back into the instructional game and as you returned to coaching on a full-time basis, we've done so much work focusing on people's skill level, but sometimes we have not done enough to tend to the emotional and the mental well-being of our players. And this whole, if we as coaches are living in a blame-filled society, so are they as players.
Yeah, no question. And I'll circle back to one of my original comments was, the advent of social media and the fact that everything is reported on, everything is commented on, you have an opinion. Everybody knows the results of every game that every kid ever plays, it seems like, or at least somebody appears to put it out there. And we lose sight of what that does to them emotionally or mentally many times. And we assume as adults that they'll be able to process it and handle it well. But, we would do well to give stricter adherence to our own teaching when we say that we have to focus on the steps along the way. And, finding someone to blame is natural. We have to just live with that. We have to understand that. I really like something that I've seen recently mentioned by Oregon football coach Dan Lanning, who says that he requires his players to evaluate their own performances. And coaches would do well to do the same thing, to sit down afterwards or to analyze the film and say, whoa, we didn't do this very well. And then we have to say, how much time have we spent emphasizing this?
Yeah.
How well have we taught this? So-and-so, in basketball, so-and-so turns the ball over too much. Well, do we let him get away with it in practice? Do we not call travels on him in practice? And now he gets called for travels in games. Have we talked to him about how to improve his fundamental footwork, things of that nature? Have we worked on putting him in different positions so that he's not maybe as vulnerable to that? All sorts of things that we have to self-evaluate over and over again, and then be able to consider, all right, what kind of burden, what kind of load can this individual, can this young person truly handle at this point based on their skill level, based on their size, strength, whatever it happens to be, or even their mental state. What level can we expect of them? What kind of burden and responsibility can we put on them? And how can we best help them to manage that, rather than providing situations that are, frankly, they are ripe for the blame game.
Right.
It's our job to anticipate those issues and look to eliminate as many of them, or at least reduce them as much as possible, so that responsibility, yes, responsibility and accountability, that's absolutely an essential part of being an athlete, being part of a team, and having to perform with some lights on and competition and so forth. We have to help them embrace their role and their responsibilities without placing undue blame or allowing them to accept undue blame that's going to now, in fact, limit their performance,
right,
and reduce their enjoyment of it as well.
Well, and Ed, I think I'll go ahead and preview for our audience. Our next episode will be about toughness, and you want to talk about an interesting topic because we will start by defining what toughness is, because there are so many different ways to define it. And I just want to say here, I promised some of my older colleagues in coaching that at some point we're going to do an episode where I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, I liked it the way that it was. I believe in it the way that it was. I want my old school. I want loud. I want hard. I want mean. I want tough, Ed. I'm not going to hear any of this new school business. And then you'll rebut it and you'll tell me the good and the bad. And because, there are some things just like this toughness piece. Well, okay, so somebody's blaming you. Who cares? You just can't pay any attention to that. But again, our kids are who they are. Kids are naturally who they are. And we're going to talk about in toughness. Look, Ed and I are so old school. We don't believe in removing every obstacle, do we? No.
No.
We don't believe in that. That's hurting kids. That's not helping them. So what we have to do, and we'll call blame what it is, blame within a team, and I believe blame within a culture, I believe it's cancer.
Sure.
But blame and dealing with it's an obstacle. But you've already said everybody here is human. Blame is going to be present. Players are going to get blamed. Players are going to lay blame. They're going to see it happening all around them. We cannot keep that from happening. We have to equip them with how to deal with it.
Right. I mean, again, it always starts with the accountability of the coach and the coaching staff, and the fact that they're not afraid to speak up and say, look, this was on us. We didn't have you prepared for this, or we told you to do this and it didn't work out. You did what we told you to do and it didn't work out. That's on us. And there's always been aspects of scouting reports and game plans, especially with basketball, where you say, we're willing to give up this. And if he does this, that's on me, right? You follow what we've instructed you to do. We believe in the long run that'll work out. Okay, so it always starts there. And then, while understanding where blame lies or accountability and responsibility lies, we also then, within the culture of the team, have to be sensitive to the fact that sometimes the strongest blame that is laid is on my teammates, from player to player. I'm doing my part. These guys won't do their job. And of course, that is, like you said, a cancer that will just eat out the guts of any sort of collective effort. And we have to work really hard to, again, teach the difference between responsibility and blame. Because like you said from the start, blame just simply accomplishes nothing. It just removes my responsibility in the whole endeavor. And it allows me to walk with some sort of a, imaginary clean conscience that says, well, it's not my fault. And then I don't have to improve. I don't have to do anything differently. And I'm not responsible for the performance of my teammates. When they can't get the job done, it'll be their fault, not mine. And of course, the best teams are the ones who have a collective mindset and who realize that everything I do, every attitude I take, it matters to the collective. And it either builds or breaks the overall team strength and culture. And those are the very, very hard lessons to teach, especially in these growing up years. Because again, everything about our lives have taught us that it's somebody's fault, from politics, even to the classroom, right? You know, I don't have this certain grade. Well, the teacher doesn't like me. Well, I don't like the way he teaches. It's always a deflection, and we have to help them understand that deflection without accountability is a sign of true weakness. It's not actually a sign of growth and strength. And those are the little things that are actually huge things within the confines of a team and within the realm of coaching and competitive athletics that often get missed by the casual fan or the parent maybe that has blinders on. Being able to have supportive parents who also have the right mindset is critical to making anything work successfully.
Well, and Ed, it's why winning and championship level culture, and I want our audience to make sure that when I refer to championship level culture, that doesn't mean it guarantees a championship. At some point, you have to be good enough against your competition. But a championship level culture, I know when you and I have worked together in the past, you have always talked to our players about being intolerant of anything that stands in the way of our best process towards our best development and performance. Blame would certainly stand in that path. We have to be intolerant of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And obviously, the people who have the most pull and cachet within a group are going to be either your older slash better players. And yeah, with that, with those great gifts or talents or with that experience comes a greater responsibility toward the whole. And yeah, your best players. I think Jeff Van Gundy said it, former NBA coach. He said your best player has to set a tone of intolerance for those things that get in the way of the team development. And blame is the most natural, most obvious hurdle that comes up.
One thing that always is front and center for me, Ed, in my mind when we go through these things, because you and I have made a very pointed effort, and again, everything is eye of the beholder, ear of the listener, if you will, in these settings. But it is our intent to not ever be preachy about these subjects, to not act as if we figured it out on time, because we are a few hairs less and a few more hair gray as we've come to some of these understandings. So we recognize the difficulty of it, but I'm always thinking, what is it we can leave coaches with that helps them most? And I still think one of the greatest things in the arsenal, in the toolbox, is the mentor coach, is the or the peer coach that you truly respect. We got to have iron sharpens iron here, and I think because we all are human, we all deal with the struggles of being blamed or laying blame. When you get into tough spots that you've never been into before, spots that feel like a little overwhelming, or I'm going to burn out. I think you got to have somebody in your circle that can help you acknowledge both changes you may have to make, or to help you see the better side of this, and just remember what our calling is as coaches. Um, because the whole blame piece, especially when it's directed at you, it's sometimes it's hard to find your reason why. It's easy to forget it. I'll put it that way.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, you get wrapped up in the outcomes that may not be turning in your favor often enough. And that's one of the things that I have learned, and I try to bring with me as somebody who now has lots of years of coaching experience. When we sit around as coaches and we evaluate our team and various members of the team and their performance and what they're doing or what they're not doing, uh, I try often to bring to the group as coaches before we deliver to the players, guys, where's our responsibility in this? What is it that we haven't done well enough? How can we make adjustments and even demonstrate a little bit of that vulnerability to say to the players, look, we like to speak definitively sometimes, but you know what? We've had to adjust. We've recognized that we've let you down on this, or we have not taught this well enough, and now collectively we're asking you to come with us toward whatever adjustments need to be made before we fall into this overall negativity game where everybody huddles in their small groups or gets off individually and starts assigning blame and walks out from under the responsibility. It starts with us, and it's our job to make sure that the team as a whole avoids this sort of pitfall.
Yeah, one of the things that you just have to realize when you take on the calling of coach, when you take on that responsibility, period, out of hand. And I've often talked about when we see young coaches, and a lot of times it's former players, obviously, that show an interest in coaching, have a desire to coaching. What they often want out of the gate is they want to coach or manage the game. They want to go out and make out some lineups and use some rotations and call some plays and try to win a game. And guys, for all of you that are in this early, or you're thinking about doing it, that's just a little bitty drop
Yep.
of what coaching and leading actually is.
Yep. And I can wrap with this. It often is in reference to your talent level. This old adage of it's not your X's and O's, it's your Jimmys and Joes. And yes, you do have to have enough good players individually. But also coaching wise, it's not what you know in terms of X's and O's. It's how you have been able to translate that and work with your Jimmies and Joes or whatever their names happen to be. It is the individuals, and that's what true coaching has really taught us over the years, is that it's not always having a better way or a different way of doing things, because none of that matters if you don't have the buy-in from your players.
Right. Well, and the legacy, of course, as we know and we understand now, coaching a ministry opportunity, the legacy, lives transformed. And if you can ever somehow find a way to keep that front and center, you're going to do pretty well at this. You're going to do a pretty good job, and you'll have a nice legacy. You'll have a nice ledger. You'll have done things the right way. For all of us, when we get caught up in wins and losses and performance, we become transactional, and that makes it tough. And then when that's the case, some of the blame does get to land on us.
Yep. Exactly.
All right, my friend, I'm going to let you take a little break. And if you're up for it, we'll go ahead and put episode 7 in the can for our folks. But that's coming sometime. You may get it back to back with episode 6. You may get it later. I don't know. But we're going to be talking about toughness. What does that mean exactly? How do we teach it the right way for our players? We don't want to get blamed for doing that the wrong way either. Partner, thank you. And by the way, just in case this is the only episode before Thanksgiving, because it could be, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 minutes, but happy Thanksgiving, my friend.
Absolutely. Same to you and yours.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time here on Coach 'em Up.